E. Michael Jones in one of my favorite books of his. If you want to get into E. Michael Jones, I suggest you start with this text right here. Degenerate moderns, modernity as rationalized sexual misbehavior. And what he does in this book is he discusses how so many of the ideas that have arisen in our world today are based on people who were sexual deviants, and then they created an ideology to rationalize their misbehavior. So they created a whole idea that helped to assuage their guilty conscience. And this, I mean, it makes sense. And so, but it's not always something that you can really prove directly, obviously, because you're talking about, you know, the inner workings of a human subjectivity here. But, you know, when you see this correspondence between, like he talks about, for example, Pablo Picasso, how when he became a sexual deviant, his drawings of women became so disfigured because he was devaluing women. So it's a very, I think it's a reasonable explanation for what things that go on. So anyhow, one of the things at the very end of this, he talks about Martin Luther, and he talks about the sexual revolution of the Protestant Revolt. And this is something that people don't talk about, which is sad, because it's one of the critical factors in the Protestant Revolt, because you literally have men and women who had previously vowed their celibacy to God getting married. And this is why Erasmus famously said, because I love this quote. Erasmus, who was very sympathetic to the Protestant Reformation, but he was a critic, and he said, so in Greek literature, there's in a tragedy, there's tragedies and comedies. In a tragedy like Oedipus Rex, in a tragedy, everybody kills himself at the end. In a comedy, everybody gets married at the end. That's like the joke, because it's basically true. And Erasmus said, when everybody started getting married and all this sexual deviance started happening, Martin Luther gets a wife, everybody gets married, you have nuns. He marries a nun. Martin Luther marries a nun. For Christ's sake, Lord Jesus, have mercy on us. And Erasmus says, well, the whole Reformation's a comedy. That's what he said. Everybody's just getting married at the end. And this is a sexual revolution. And there's all sorts of sexual deviancy being done. Now, Martin Luther, to his credit, was less sexually deviant than others, but he still married a nun. He broke his own celibacy vows. His wife broke her vows so they could get married. And this is where I think explains the doctrine of sola fide, which is where doesn't matter what you do, sin on boldly, said Martin Luther. Doesn't matter what you do, you're totally a sinner. God's just going to forgive you anyways. And it doesn't matter. And I think it also explains the destruction of the cult of Mary, because you really can't have a devotion to Mary and stand before the mother of God and commit all these sexual sins. Not possible. You have to destroy Mary. And this is what they did. This is the Dutch, the Beetlestrom in we'll talk about the Dutch in a minute with Santa Claus. And they just went wild. This is the Protestants. They went crazy. They went into churches and destroyed with hammers statues of Mary and the saints. Insane, shameful deeds. But then just real quick, another, I think, even more powerful and easily proven rationalization is the robbing of the poor. So the other economic aspect that's not talked about in the Protestant Revolt, which is where the Protestant politicians, if they became Protestant, they could rob the poor. And this is what Henry VIII did in particular. He seized all the monasteries, which had all these